Lawyers of Reddit, what case you wish you never won? Right before taking my bar exam in Germany, I was working in a small law firm as a law apprentice. There was one case which was given to me because it was considered unwinnable, but the client insisted on pushing through. The case was about an elderly lady who sold her cat because she was too sick to take care of her. The buyer of the cat, our client, a rather wealthy lady, took the cat to the vet right after buying it. Apparently the cat needed 2,000 euros worth of surgeries. She hired us to collect those 2,000 from the old lady. She was really an unpleasant woman, to say at least. She acted without even the slightest bit of remorse or empathy. She knew exactly in what situation the old lady was because she was the one who informed us about it. Nevertheless, we won the case pretty quick, even though our client didn't have a leg to stand on. I had a misdemeanor stalking case once. Client wanted a jury trial, so we did that, and I had to question the poor girl who was getting harassed by this guy. The jury came back with a not guilty verdict, and my client turned to me and said incredulously, "They found me not guilty?" Yeah, that case. Not a lawyer, but when I was a paralegal, my boss got a 6 offender acquitted of the most serious charge of first-degree sexual assault. We had a confession he'd given to our firm's hired shrink locked in my boss's desk drawer. During the trial, the lawyer had me, at the time a woman in my 20s, sit directly beside the perv, so the jury could see I wasn't afraid of him. He insisted on taking the stand. During his testimony, I casually turned around to look at his wife. On her face was etched a look of horror. She, who knew him best, could tell he was lying. Up to that point, I guess she believed his story, that the teenaged employee was just after his money. I felt so gross after that, and switched to a real estate and refinance law firm. We took a copyright case to trial twice, and then an appeal, and won every time. The case was on contingency: the client doesn't pay unless you win. We have spent years trying to collect the judgment from the defendant so we can get paid. We have a judgment for our own fees that is close to $1 million, throwing good money after bad. The defendant hid his assets very effectively, put all hard assets into LLCs, got paid hundreds of thousands a year in cash and services to avoid banks, etc. He died of COVID-19 on Friday and was likely savvy enough to avoid probate. All of this is a gross oversimplification, but the TLD is we won a case 3 times and have never been paid a cent because the loser was very shady and died, so we will likely get nothing for the client or ourselves. I used to prosecute neglect cases in big city in America for child protection services. After a few high-profile cases where young kids ended up dead at the hands of family members, CPS starting asking us to file on pretty much everybody. I understand why, but I wish UFI would have stood up to the bad press instead of allowing it to dictate who they brought to court. From that point on, I would say about half my cases, even though a cause of action existed, I felt guilty for winning. Edit. Location removed. No thanks. Ethics Committee. Was a labor lawyer for some time, and we had a no exception policy against using the company credit card for personal expenses. Everyone knows you get fired for it because they beat it into you with frequent training, make you sign stuff, etc. We fired a guy who was a few months from retirement, and his union filed for arbitration. Arbitration is kind of a joke, and any labor lawyer will tell you that no arbitrator would uphold that termination, even if the guy was near retirement. We won. Due to the way the pension worked, the fact he left before he reached 55 led to a massive pension discount, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, by the way, his offense was filling up his car with gas using company card because he had left his personal card somewhere and was going to run out of gas. On the other side of the coin, I had many employees do insane things like hide and sleep at work for 40 hours, lead to a 30,000-gallon gasoline spill, fighting, death threats, etc., who all got their jobs back through arbitration. Seeing lots of armchair lawyers in here, but I can tell you the cases we often wish we lost, the ones where clients don't pay their damn bills. Actually getting paid is one of the most stressful parts of practicing. My ex-husband owes his lawyer $16,000. She accidentally emailed me his invoice for our divorce, in which I didn't have a lawyer, and got really screwed over, but has very low income. I always wonder if his lawyer is ever going to get paid. Not a lawyer, I'm a paralegal who worked in insurance defense. One of our cases was trying to get the lowest possible amount for a guy who, while doing his job in a stationary car, was hit from behind at full speed. His car was off the road, the other driver was impaired, and his car was slammed into the 18-wheeler he was helping. He is forever handicapped and in a home, and our job was to get him way less than he deserved. I didn't want to work insurance defense anymore after that one. I used to do divorces, mostly. I'm not cut out for that work, but it's the job I could get out of law school. A guy came in for a divorce and seemed, by all accounts, really nice. He claimed that they had $50K in cash in their safe, and that his wife had taken it out when she left the house. His ex-wife never worked, so seemed reasonable she would take the money to help pay bills, start over, etc. 6 months in though, when we were finalizing property, his true colors started to show. Refusing to let her have the toaster, arguing over giving her anything, even though she hadn't worked their entire 15-year marriage, telling her she could have half of the expensive plants she tended to only if she came and got them herself without help. For reference, these plants were in a greenhouse and some weighed upwards of 100 pounds each. She probably weighed 100 pounds herself. Extremely meek woman in her 60s. The other lawyer and I finally get everything settled, except the $50K. My client says she took it. Ex-wife says she did initially but then put it back on the advice of her attorney. So we go to trial just on this $50K. I cross-examine her elderly parents. Treat them as hostile, really go all out, up against a veteran attorney who had been doing this for 30+ years. While I was brand new, I had to show my worth. In the end, the judge ended up declaring that the $50K was lost money. No one, technically, wins. 1 hour later my client waltzes into the office and pays his $15K bill all in $100 bills. I just stared silently at the money while he smiled widely at me, thanked me for helping him and then left. I quit practicing law entirely 3 months later. I still think about his ex-wife who honestly seemed sweet and lovely and hope she's okay. I was representing a homeless dude whom the government was trying to get custody over so they could force him into rehab. It was a bit rare in that government rarely bothers due to the high expenses. You have medical reviews, the fact it has to go before a judge and the defendant must be provided with a lawyer and the low odds of success, since no one likes the idea of forcible institutionalization. In this case, the guy was jacking off outside windows and stealing packages. The former, more so than the latter, had gotten a critical mass of neighbors to pursue the city to actually try for custody. Pretty easy win due to the very high bar to actually get someone for more than a short-term mental health hold. In all honesty, I felt like the city wasn't trying that hard, so much as going through the motions, so they could tell the voters we tried. Did not feel great looking at all the folks who had packed into the courtroom as they realized the guy was not going to be forced into rehab and would instead be right back outside their window. But it got worse. The homeless guy went on a victory lap of jacking off. Local police were called during the part of the victory lap where he was outside the window of minor and a frustrated father kicked the shit out of the homeless guy. The homeless guy went on to prevail in a civil suit for damages against the guy who beat his ass that I was not part of, used the money to buy drugs, and was killed while wandering around a freeway ramp high as frick. Long story short, if I had lost in the following 6 months, one guy wouldn't have to take a plea deal on the beating. 2 poor dudes who were coming home late from a landscaping job wouldn't have had to deal with the trauma of running a guy over, and the homeless guy would have been getting clean as opposed to getting introduced to the bumper of a medium duty pickup doing about 55 miles per hour late one night. Also very annoyed the DA never just ran the guy on the indecent exposure issues, put him up on that, and then offer him a plea deal where, if he does inpatient rehab, no jail. The whole approach by various city officials just reeked of don't really want to win, but can't appear like we aren't doing anything, because the primary is in 8 months. Not a lawyer, but I became friends with one after my friend took USAA to court after they wouldn't pay a claim when their member rear-ended her on her scooter after she stopped for a stop sign. Their lawyer kept talking to me to try to coach my friend on what to say, but she just wouldn't listen. He was a nice guy and wanted to help her since his client was obviously in the wrong. Unfortunately, USAA won and she was stuck with a $12K bill. Client hired gig consultants from another consulting firm. The firm basically found qualified people and rented them out, sort of like a recruiter, but they get fees forever common in it consulting. Client eventually thought he was paying too much, even though he agreed to it, and stopped paying. He owed $200K. In NJ, you need to be licensed as a consulting firm. If you're not, you can't sue for your unpaid bills. They sued anyway, tried to argue some loopholes. We won. Client paid nothing beyond my legal fees. Was I happy I won? Man, gave me a great story, great for my reputation. Doesn't feel great helping out a douchebag though. I'm an underling who had no role in being able to reject the case, so that was a little bit of a consolation at least. Edit, clarity. I always thought it would be cool to be a lawyer, until I had to pay $63K in attorney fees over the course of 2 years for custody of my daughter. Now I'm not complaining so much about the money, more so about watching her attorney try to turn a turd into a piece of gold, no matter how irrefutable the evidence against her was. I wouldn't be able to live with myself or sleep at night defending on cases like that where I would potentially be trying to return children to drugs, rape, abuse, neglect and etc. I represented a man accused of murder. I was able to get him off on a technicality during his arrest, but it was pretty clear he was guilty of the murder. I truly regret getting him off, because he was most definitely guilty. I represented a foreign medical company. They have a worldwide monopoly in a treatment for a specific kind of cancer. They used to sell these treatments to hospital and other public organizations. They had a fight with buyers for the price of the treatment. They wanted to be paid way more of the price set up by the hospitals, so they decided to fake a shortage in some of the components needed and stopped producing this product worldwide, leaving a lot of patients to certain death. After some time, that they came back to produce that same product and their price demand were met. They had both criminal and civil consequences, but in the end I managed to reduce their responsibility to just a small economic fine, which was less than 0.0001% of the profit they made with this whole operation. For non-Americans, ICE is the federal agency that rounds up undocumented immigrants and deports them. An undocumented immigrant had been hired by a farm, and then the farm refused to pay. When he demanded his payment, the farmer turned him in to be deported. Since it was the second time that farmer had turned the guy in, it was unauthorized re-entry, a felony. The prosecutors really didn't want to go after the guy. Really bad press. However, there was an ICE agent waiting right outside the courthouse. We thought that maybe if the guy does a couple months jail time, ICE forgets about him once he's let out, and in the meantime we could go after the farmer to get payment. Ultimately, we decided that we were criminal defense attorneys, not immigration lawyers or business lawyers, and we couldn't ethically allow a guy to go to jail if we could get him out of it. We filed a motion to dismiss on procedural grounds. The prosecution didn't oppose, and the guy was promptly rounded up by ICE, deported, never got his money, and could never come back to the US again. I won a case for a pharmaceutical company that was accused of selling contaminated products. My cases were all against people who had developed terminal illnesses, and I fought tooth and nail to discredit the scientific experts that the plaintiffs put on the stand. I started out losing cases and the sting of a loss lasted a day or two. The mistrials were best because we kinda won, as in kicking the can down the road. Looking at a dying person when the jury read their verdict in my favor will never leave me. I didn't show up at work for months, then kinda sat at my desk for a few months, then eventually quit. I'm living off my savings now, not as much as you'd think, and volunteering for organizations that need lawyers. If it lost that case I would have stayed in my happy world indefinitely. I'm glad I'm out of that world, but that win took its toll on my life. In college a lady came to my multicultural class to talk about being a lawyer. Her big case that made her was defending a multi-million-dollar condo building who had a door issue. Some meth heads got in and raped and imprisoned this lady for a few days. She basically spun it like the lady was into Crazy Six and the condo building won. It was the last case she took in the private sector and started dodgy pro bono and public defense. She hated what she did and had to make amends with society. Listening to her talk about all the slimy shit she did make me realize, if you ever have to deal with anything legal, get an attorney and never see another attorney on your own. I knew someone who was a defense attorney in Florida, had a great record. He was defending a teacher accused of molestation. During the testimony of the key witness, he realized his client is guilty and was excited by the testimony. After a recess, he still went in and gave a harsh cross-examination, destroyed the victim's credibility, and secured a not guilty verdict. Winning this case led him to be recruited by a big law New York City firm that threw a ton of money at him. It turned into a nightmare. His wife ended up committed to an insane asylum and his boss was a real devil. There was this guy who just vibed and drew Cunanan, I guess. Just a very gay, him going wear a Dalson Gabbani t-shirt while I strangle Yora. Anyway, he was the worst driver I'd ever see, constantly getting in accidents, going off-road and into fences for no reason. The guy had only had a license for a year, and he was already a point or two away from getting suspended. This ticket would put him over the top. I got him no points on his license. I assume the prosecutor just didn't look at his driving record, because my god, he was a menace behind the wheel. Not the most exciting story, but it's the only positive result I regretted. I know a guy who worked as a public defender USA after just passing the bar. He was assigned a client who constantly abused his kid. The client ended up in jail after a particularly nasty beating, but CPS filled out the paperwork wrong, which this guy noticed, so the abusive father was able to get off and get his kid back. Very sad. None of them. I want to win. I knew though that I'd have a tougher time not being emotionally engaged with family law and crime and anything else really emotive, and so forged a career where it's companies and cash at stake. Now I work in-house as a litigator for a multinational co-covering disputes throughout the world. I always do make sure that, if we're thinking of litigating in a funky country, that the penalties aren't inhumane. No interest in someone getting executed or flogged for messing with the company. Mandatory, not a lawyer, but a story my history teacher gave me. His father was a lawyer. Warning, this story is graphic and may be disturbing for some readers. An elderly woman was found robbed and killed and her purse stole. At the top of the list of suspects was a man with a criminal record. Two police without a warrant entered this man's house and found the purse and arrested him. Enter the lawyer. Fresh out of school, the state handed him a murder case and he was tasked with defending a guilty man. When he asked the man whether he had actually killed her in private lawyer/client talks, the man beat around the bush and would not say. The day of the trial, the lawyer shows up and wins the case by having the evidence thrown out as it was obtained without a warrant. Without evidence there was no case and was found innocent. When the murdering scumbag walked out of the courtroom, he turned to the lawyer, held out his hand, and said, "Thank you, I killed her." The lawyer threw up and booked it in another direction. He quit criminal law next day. This is not where it ends though. Over a decade later, while watching the news, he sees the murderer was killed in a shootout with police. He broke into a family's home. Police were called, and not only was he killed, but the family was also murdered by him. He breaks down and cries, and he had to tell his children why it was his fault these people were dead. If he hadn't defended that man, he may never have killed again. This happened in Pennsylvania, that's all I know. Location: first killing was in the 50s/60s. The murder was killed in the 80s. A woman and a man divorce. They have 3 kids. I was the woman's lawyer. The woman tells me stories of what the husband did to the kids. Apparently he abused them and scared them into doing what he wanted. I presented this case to the judge and the man still doesn't get to see his kids. I later find out that the man was only a strict parent. Never laid a finger on those children though. I'm so upset I'll let this manipulative woman take 3 kids away from a man who would actually shape them into real adults. I was assigned to do our firm's public defender volunteer work and got sent to a rural community to hear the cases for the evening. All easy stuff: traffic tickets, some disorderly persons, etc. until I got to one public intoxication and DUI. I got his case, read his history, and saw that he had never taken advantage of a program that would allow the court to stay sentencing. If he agreed to counseling and stayed clean for some period of time, can't remember, maybe 6 months or something. It was a while ago. So I got him to agree, worked with the prosecutor, judge agrees, license was suspended, but sentence of 90 days was stayed pending outcome of counseling and clean record. Guy was ecstatic, I was pleased with my cleverness, we all went home happy. I get a call from the prosecutor the next morning. My guy was in the freaking morgue, dead as a post. Seems he was so happy with my work that he went out, got drunk and passed out along one of the back roads and got himself run over. The only upside was that he couldn't drive and kill anyone else. But the guy that killed him was a wreck. His wife and son were a wreck. They all blamed me. If only I had let them send him to jail, he would still be alive. I stopped practicing law not long after that. It's been about 10 years and I have never regretted leaving it behind. Not mine, but a friend's. It was a children custody. The woman was suing her ex-boyfriend for full custody. He wasn't allowed to abandon the case because of the system. Basically, she was pressing with some proofs she was assaulted by him. He was her lawyer on that, but it got proven that the hit marks were macup. He still won, but felt really bad after that. I don't think I ever saw him get so wasted after work. First case. Custody modification. Case history was an absolute mess. My client should have won. We lost at trial, won on appeal, but by then it was too late. The kids hadn't seen their mother in a year and had been moved to another state. Personal feeling or opinions have no place when the case is actually being run. We signed up to be professionals in the justice system. That is doubly reason for us to be objective and leave our personal feelings out. Yes, behind the scene we all have our opinions on clients, be it positive or negative. But when it comes to actually conducting the case, we separate this very clearly. It seems the op is somewhat hinting to the criminal case direction, i.e. I helped a super racist arsonist mass murder that burned down an orphanage. Many of us do other matters, and probably don't even litigate. Many matters also settle before court.